Okay. Hi, guys. We're live. Just a little note on Brexit here. It's still all up in the air. Anything can happen. I think this typifies the confusion right up until the deadline and beyond that I was talking about, because we still don't know. Will May be able to bring her vote back? Because Burko is not that keen on allowing it because there's been no change. Will she be able to negotiate the extension in time? Time is on our side as Brexiteers who hope for no deal, and anything is still possible. Now, one of you guys who wrote in raised the question of whether 52-48, which was the Brexit split in terms of the voting, is enough of a mandate. And someone else was saying that to me. So I thought I'd just address that issue. The first thing I'm going to say is, in 1973, when the vote was held over whether we were to go in or not, that was also based on you just had to get over 50% to get over the line. So it would seem rather odd if to come out there's a higher bar. For all the people who are saying that it's not much of a mandate, it's too late in the day to say that. We knew the rules of the game ahead of June 23rd, and the rules were it was just going to be over 50%. So to say now, oh, well, it's not, people knew that before. And we went, every side, Remain and Leave, went into this. Hi, Silka. Everyone went into this knowing that those were the rules, that you had to get over 50%, and those are the rules of the game. It's a bit, reminds me of the American election, where they complained afterwards that Donald Trump won the Electoral College, but he didn't win the popular vote. And the situation there is, well, those are the rules, and those have been the rules for decades or centuries in America. So people know the rules when they go in and play the game, and you've got to stick with that. Also, like in sport, often the margins are very, very small to win. I mean, you can win a tennis game in the fifth set on a tie break with just 2 points. And like in football, if you get a goal in the last minute of extra time, you still win. Even you might have scored 5-0, you win. Goal in the last minute of extra time, you win. Now, they might say because this is democracy and it affects the whole country, it's different. Yes, but Jeremy Corbyn could take the government with maybe 500,000 votes more than the Tories. And a lot of people feel that they're a lot more scared of a Corbyn government, especially business say they're far more scared of a Corbyn government than of no deal. So there's an example where a very, very, very small margin, because of the way the constituencies are laid out, could lead to a Corbyn government, which would actually affect a lot of us far more than a no-deal Brexit, right? So there. The next reason I say that this whole 52-48 is actually quite a big margin is because of the rule of incumbency. There's always a pull in every vote towards the status quo. So they say when a president in America is the incumbent, or your sitting MP is an incumbent, it's much harder to dislodge him and get a new person in. So when you're voting against the status quo, which we were doing with Brexit, it's far harder. So given that, the margin of 4% is actually very, very large, considering that the huge preponderance of probability would have been sticking with the status quo. That means I think 52-48 is significant in that direction. Along with the fact it was a David and Goliath situation where everyone was behind Remain. All the MPs, mainly, weren't they? Or let's say majority of the MPs, majority of the civil service. The sitting Prime Minister, David Cameron, was for remaining. All of the EU were throwing their weight, obviously, behind Remain. I think all the world leaders were coming out, like Barack Obama came and saying, you must remain. All the celebrities, the media bias, big pharma, big banks, big business, all the experts, really. You know, it was a David and Goliath situation where the huge tidal wave of global opinion, not just opinion in this country. What about the funding? What about the non-state actors like George Soros and other people who are plowing money into Remain, and we still won, which I think makes our win that much more significant, that it cannot be just swept away. And I also just think this is kind of convenient, because if it had been maybe 51 or 51 point something to 49 point something for Remain, we wouldn't even be having this argument. They would have said, we're knocking that on the head, no more talk of that. I also think, very similar to how Hillary Clinton wouldn't accept responsibility for her loss, I think Remain are not looking at themselves for why they lost. Think of the kind of people who were campaigning for Remain. Obviously, their strategists simply are clueless. Tony Blair is one of the most toxic people in politics. Every time they give him airtime, He turns people off. Him being an advocate for a Remain, what I would say was one of the nails in their coffin. Then when they had the speeches, they had people like Nicola Sturgeon coming out in support of Remain. Another mistake, because she's toxic for a lot of English voters because she has such a strong anti-English thing, and there's the whole Scottish independence thing coming on. Another big mistake. Then you've got people, David Cameron, not particularly popular, John Major, massive Remain fan, also not the old grey man. People like him, Ken Clarke, Michael Heseltine, they're all turn-offs. They're all the old grey men of a past generation, not particularly inspiring. We won't get to listen to them. And in case of Heseltine, a past is a backstabber. So, and then you had Nick Clegg coming out in Remain, where he'd already disappointed so many people with changing his stance on the student fees. So if you look at everyone who was supporting Remain, all those people were pretty much turn-offs. And you had guys with a lot more public appeal and some very pleasant women like Gisela Stewart, Kate Hoey, Andrea Levson, people we really took to, as opposed to kind of Amber Rudd, which no one is really a big fan of. So when you put all that together, yes, we might have been fighting a lot, but Remain made strategic errors. The other big reason Remain lost is none of them came out and said that the EU was wonderful. All they could say was, well, you know, we'd better be in for business, and we know it needs reform, and we know it's not great, and we know it's not really that democratic, and we understand it's not that accountable, but we still think we should be in. Well, that's not a great argument for it. The only thing they had going for it was fear. They didn't have any wonderful, glowing, exciting arguments for why we should stay in. Did they? So that's another big reason. And what I've also thought with this whole Remain argument that's coming out now is it's so ageist, and it's displayed a really nasty side of a lot of the Remainers, phoning up and saying about old people stealing their futures, old people this, old people that. I'd like to point out that old people are still paying taxes. They taxed on their pension. If they pass away, they'll be massively taxed through inheritance tax. Many people are now working at 75. As lawyers, dentists, builders, all sorts of people are still working at 75. So should they be taxed and not have representation, taxation without representation? Are we trying through this whole Remain fiasco to try and rewrite what democracy means? Suddenly 50% or over 50% isn't good enough. Suddenly people who only got a few more years to live shouldn't be allowed to vote, which I think is kind of ridiculous, because someone at 75 could easily live to 95. I know masses of people living into their 90s, so they could have 20 years on them. Someone who's 17 could be killed or have anything happen to them. So it's a totally false argument. It's so ageist. I feel in other countries, like in Japan, in Africa, the elderly are respected for their wisdom and their understanding, and not in this country. They just want to throw old people under the bus. People who reach that age, they do know more. I mean, you just can't get away with it. When you're younger, you look at your parents, your grandparents, they say things, you don't believe them, you think they're wrong. And as the years go by, you find they're pretty much right on everything. Their wisdom counts for an awful lot. And you've got to remember that young people have coming out of school, they don't know anything. They haven't contributed 1 minute's worth of tax. These people who are older have spent their whole life contributing to this country, building it up, making what it is what it is, and paying tax. And now suddenly they shouldn't have a say in the future, when a lot of people are voting on behalf of their grandchildren, the community at large, their children. They're not just voting for selfish reasons. So let me read some comments. She's off again. Out means out. End of. Yeah, she's off. Teresa, you mean? Yeah, she's off to Europe again. The world elite don't like people thinking for themselves. The world elite hate it because they had democracy kind of sewn up, where whoever you voted for, you got the same result. That's why they're not keen on referendums. That's why they want to put the bar so high that if we vote for anything, it's going to be almost impossible to achieve. But if you think about it, like I say, I mean, Corbyn could squeak in on about 20,000 votes. It's that close. And would we complain about that? All these people banging on about the second referendum, they don't understand. We're leaving the European Union. If there's going to be a second referendum, the options should be the current offer or no deal. Absolutely, because why would we vote on the same thing again? Like, we've had the vote on Remain or Leave. It's now, do people want Teresa's deal or no deal? Excellent, that's what it should be. Preferably, let's just leave next week and forget about it. Hope you and all your subscribers and yourself had a good St. Patrick's weekend. Yes, I hope everyone out there enjoyed St. Patrick's Day. and had a good party up. Yeah, great. Good time of year. Nice. Weather's improving as well. The MPs have not yet understood that if we remain in the EU, they'll be out of a job. You know, I wonder what these MPs do understand. They seem rather dim. I really do think we've got a very, very poor crop of MPs. That was confirmed by looking at a lot of their charts, which are very charts that kind of lack talent, lack ability, lack leadership, lack vision, lack guts, lack chutzpah, lack about everything you could think of. Yes, and even someone on radio was saying the other day that if you look, I think it was Nigel Farage said on his Sunday show that if you look at the front bench now compared to 20 years ago, you can't believe how poor it actually is. Yeah, and on Mike Graham's show this morning, a lot of people were phoning in, that people that work in various government departments, and saying that there's just a lot of they just rely on consultants. They call consultants in. These consultants from the accountancy firms come, make a lot of money, give a lot of pointless advice. If you're in a job, why do you need a consultant? Surely you're in that job, you should be making these decisions because you're the hands-on person with the experience in that particular industry or in that government department. And they were talking now as well about how there's no incentive to train people, to train new doctors, to train new nurses. They'd rather just bring people in from foreign countries. But we know that the best universities are in this country, right? And in America. Most of the best universities are in Britain, America. Yes, there are quite a lot in Europe. Surely we should be drawing our medical people from those rather than from potentially third-rate universities where we don't particularly know what we're buying into. That would be what I think. Lisa, you are the world of reason. Well, I like to think so. When I hear these arguments, sometimes I feel quite frustrated because I feel a lot of them are false arguments, are not very well thought through arguments. So at least this gives me the power to come on here and put it to you and give you guys some ideas of arguments, because maybe your friends, or if you ring a radio station, you can then use what I've said and put it out there to other people and say, yeah, this is why 52-48 in this instance is a thumping win. It's a thumping win. And who knows, it could have been a lot bigger than that, because you never know what was really going on, do you? Hashtag vote rigging and, you know, all the sort of thing. I still think it's a little bit too easy for people in this country to be voting when they shouldn't really be voting. And I know they've tightened up on that. But I once wrote in one of my novels, Next of Sin, I had a kind of fictitious little anecdote where the voters roll came in someone's house and they filled in the name of their dog, and when voting came around, an electoral form arrived for the dog, and it literally, you could have done that years gone by. You could have written literally 10 names onto your voting form and all the voters cards would have come in and you could have all trotted off and voted. It could have easily happened. They have tightened up a little bit more, which was a good thing. Okay, it's great to have chatted to you all. Those are my thoughts, and we have to see what happens in the next week. I was feeling a little bit depressed at the end of last week, but then things totally changed over the weekend. And again, we're seeing news today of the government upping planning for no deal. There's a lot of talk of the Visegrad countries possibly not okaying an extension. I wouldn't get too excited about that, because the other 27 vote like 27 Siamese twins. They really do vote like lemmings. It's very rare for them to step out of line, but they're also scared, you know. But it's getting to the point where they might. So anything can happen. So we keep on in there. And even, look, it wasn't my prediction, but even if we go to May and we would get involved in the MEP elections, that could potentially be very exciting. Just a note, remember I was saying in my other broadcast that Nigel Farage's Brexit party is doing nothing. He admitted on Sunday that his party is currently only a website. So I was right in perceiving that he's not really doing very much with it. So I think the option right now is UKIP. Okay, thanks for that. And for all you guys in Ireland who are having a bank holiday today, I hope you're all having a great time. And for everyone else in the UK, well, looks like the weather's really going to be picking up, especially on Wednesday. So enjoy it. Have a good week. And